Today we're going to tell the story of an epic journey during the Golden Age of Islam, of a man who traveled further than anyone else up to this point in world history. The journey he's going to take is going to take us through the Islamic world after the arrival of Turkic and Mongol peoples. This is after the fall of the Abbasid dynasty. This journey will take us from Islamic Spain all the way to China. We'll give you a little context on the world that Ibn Battuta is experiencing. In the last video, we looked at the Golden Age of Islam during the Umayyad and Abbasid dynasties, where you had the political spread of Islam through these two states, but you also had the spread of Islam through merchant activity as well. And this is the world that Battuta will be traveling in. There are Turkic and Mongol people coming in, which will be a change. However, there will be continuities as well from that earlier period of Islamic history. These Turkic and Mongol people will convert to Islam and do much like the previous sultans and rulers had done before them, which is to become patrons of the arts, patrons of the sciences. They'll engage in building projects, etc. Okay? So while we do have a massive change coming, we will see a lot of continuities in the Islamic world as well. A little background on who Ibn Battuta is. Okay, this is our world traveler. He spends about 30 years on the road. And as I said, he's going to go farther than anyone else in world history up to this point. Unfortunately, we don't know a lot about him. We do know that he's a trained Islamic scholar, meaning he went to university in his home territory of Morocco, where he studied the Quran and the Hadiths of Islam. This enables him to become what would be known as a jurist. Because we have this common world of Islam, this will enable him to not just travel through these places, but actually work for the bureaucracy and the rulers of some of these places as well. When he begins his journey, this is the start of his Hajj, his pilgrimage to Mecca. He's going to do this 3 times in his life. Now, for our purposes, we're not really going to split these up into 3 different journeys, okay? We're going to kind of condense these into one story, right? So it's a little bit easier to make sense of. If you remember the Hajj, that's the pilgrimage to Mecca. And as a Muslim, there is a idea that you should do this at least once in your lifetime, right? If you are financially able to do so, and if your health enables you to do so. Now, he's going to do this 3 times. After he makes the pilgrimage, he will keep going. He will visit these various places in the Islamic world that have been conquered by these Turkic and Mongol people. So we can see what's happening after the Umayyad and Abbasid empires, okay, through the travels of Ibn Battuta. Our starting point here is going to be in Egypt, right? Egypt at this time is on the way to Mecca, right? So that's going to be his first major stop. Egypt is under the control of the Mamluk dynasty, a very interesting dynastic period. These are a Turkic people. The Mamluk people are freed slaves. This is a rule by a group of people who were formerly enslaved, right? They've been freed, and they've basically become the military of this new leader. While he's in Egypt, he'll go to Cairo, right? And it's in Cairo where he'll experience the aftermath of someone who came before him. That's Mansa Musa, okay, the emperor of Mali in West Africa, which is a story we're going to come back to in the future. As Mansa Musa comes through Cairo on his Hajj, he brings so much wealth with him, gold in particular, that he actually upsets the gold markets in Cairo. Mansa Musa is known as the richest man in the world at this time because Mali is at the epicenter of these trade routes in West Africa, and he's basically able to control the routes of salt and gold moving through. So extremely wealthy man. And as I mentioned, we'll come back to him in a future episode. It's also in Egypt. He goes to Alexandria, and this is where he kind of gets the seed planted to keep going, right, after his Hajj. Right? He meets a gentleman who tells him that he has friends in China and in India who are Muslim. Right? So this kind of gets the gears rolling in his head. Once he leaves Cairo, he'll make his pilgrimage to Mecca. He wants to keep going, so he's going to hook up with a group of pilgrims who are returning to Persia. He's going to join up with one of these camel caravans. There's about 20,000 people in this group with him. Okay, this is a huge group of people who are returning to Persia, which now is under the Khanate, which is a branch of the Mongol Empire. It's in Persia where he's going to first encounter Sufi Muslims, really interesting group of people who start during the Umayyad dynasty. Their basic idea is that Islam has kind of been corrupted by the material world, and we need to return to a more spiritual focus than a material focus. And he's quite impressed with this philosophy. He spends some time worshiping with them, and he learns that they have a interesting aspect to their worship, which is dancing. Right? And this is kind of a form of meditation for the Sufi people, right? It's to get them in touch with Allah or God, right? And this won't be the last time that he'll worship with Sufi people on his journeys. He's quite impressed with them. When he leaves Persia, he's going to go through Turkey. That journey is supposed to take him to India. And India at this time is under the Delhi Sultanate. Okay? These are also a Turkic group of people who have moved into northern India. He's going to get a job working for the Delhi Sultanate. Because remember, he's a scholar, right? He's a learned man. The emperor of the Delhi Sultanate is quite paranoid. He doesn't trust the people around him. So he likes to bring in people from the outside. So that's where Ibn Battuta comes in. He gets a job working for the Sultan. And what he realizes is this guy's got some problems. On the one hand, he's quite intellectual. He's quite interested in books and learning. But on the other hand, he's also can be quite violent if things don't go his way. Right? So he has quite mixed feelings about this Sultan. In fact, at one point, as he's hanging out with some of his Sufi friends, one of them comes under suspicion from the Sultan because he really doesn't want anything to do with politics. He's called upon by the Sultan, he refuses to go. All right, so this man ends up being tortured and killed. The names of all his friends are given to the authorities, which included Ibn Battuta. Ibn Battuta is basically put on house arrest for several months. He's not sure what's going to happen to him. And the news he gets is quite exciting to him. They've appointed him to be the ambassador to China, something that he really wasn't expecting, but that is quite thrilling to him because he wants to go to China. Now, this doesn't go the way things are planned. On the way to China, the 3 ships that are full of tribute for the Emperor of China end up sinking. It's all lost. And he's quite worried about this, right? He knows that the emperor is kind of unstable. He's not sure what would happen to him if he happened to go home and say that I failed the mission. So he decides not to, right? He abandons his ambassadorship and decides, I'm just going to go to China on my own, right? We're not going to deal with this. He gets to China, and here he has mixed feelings. He's, on the one hand, quite impressed with what's happening in China in terms of politics and in terms of economics. This is China under the Yuan dynasty, which is a Mongol dynasty. The Mongols in China are not Muslim. They've taken on the Tibetan faith from Tibet, but they're very welcoming of people from all over the world, including Muslims. So you have, in southern China especially, huge Muslim communities, right? Especially in Guangzhou, right? And that's the first place that he goes, right? This is where he's able to view the oldest mosque in China. And he's very impressed with the Muslim community there. He says he feels very at home. However, when he ventures out of that Muslim community, this is where he has mixed feelings, right? At one point he says, I could walk all the way across China with all of my possessions and nothing's going to happen to me. I don't have to fear traveling. He's impressed with the economy of China. He mentions the porcelain that's being shipped out to the rest of the world. But on the other hand, he's disappointed that it's not a Muslim society, right? So he's kind of constantly pointing out these non-Islamic things that are happening. From China, he'll return home to Morocco and make one final journey. And that journey will be to Islamic Europe, what's Spain and Portugal today. Spain and Portugal are under Islamic rule for around 500 or so years, quite a long time, okay? And he's going to arrive there kind of at the tail end of this. And just a brief discussion of Islamic Spain. This is an amazing place. Now, obviously in a 500-year period, you're going to have ups and downs. However, historians will note that in the middle years of Islamic Spain, you have one of the most tolerant societies in the world, right? You have a Muslim majority, but you also have Christian and Jewish minority. And in Islam, these are referred to as people of the book because they are related in a sense to the tradition of Islam. Muslims see a lineage from Judaism and Christianity to Islam. They would consider Moses and Jesus to be prophets in that lineage leading up to the Prophet Muhammad. In Granada at this time, in Spain, you have not just a tolerance of Jews and Christians, but they're integral to the society. They're scholars, right? They're working with the administration in the sciences, astronomy, mathematics, philosophy. Right? They're very important people. And I should also mention that when we're talking about tolerance, this is a place where homosexuality is tolerated. Again, one of the few places in the world at this time where you can actually point to these things and say, this is a quite liberal society in terms of cultural values, right? While Battuta doesn't really focus on the tolerance and diversity of Granada, his focus is more on the infrastructure, which is amazing, luscious gardens all over the city. Basically the control of water. And what's happening here is pretty remarkable, okay? You have these Islamic engineers basically making it so water can run uphill and then flow back down and gravity feed the city. And they do this through some pretty amazing engineering, right? They have these irrigation canals dug that are hooked to water wheels that can bring this water up to the top of the hill, gravity feed it down to the city. Now, what are they doing with this water? The people in Granada have running water in their homes. They have flush toilets in their homes, okay? You go out into the city itself, there are botanical gardens that are being watered with this gravity-fed water. There are public baths. And he basically describes Granada as the most amazing place he has ever seen. And he's not the only person to say this, okay? If you read descriptions of Granada, this is the consensus, that this place is just blowing people's mind. And you got to remember, Battuta has been all over the world. This is the end of his journeys. And this is the conclusion that he comes to, is that this place is awesome. If you go to Granada today, you can still see a lot of this. The Alhambra, it's still there. It's an amazing structure. It's on a hill, right? That's where the water is being pumped up to. The site itself is full of various gardens all over the top of this hillside. The hillside itself has gardens coming down the hill. I would have loved to have seen it during this time period. I mean, it's hard to imagine us today what this looked like. Now, from Spain and Portugal, he'll return to Morocco, where the Sultan of Morocco will commission him to have his works transcribed, right? So essentially what's going to happen is he's going to dictate his travel journey to a scribe, which will create this text that we have today, right? Which we call the Rihla, or the journey. When we look at this as a whole, what we see is a world of Islam that is not controlled by a central authority, right? You don't have something like the Abbasid Empire trying to politically control the whole system anymore, right? You have these different Islamic states who are kind of doing their own thing, right? They're interacting with each other, but they're not under one whole anymore. When we're thinking about this idea of exploration, often we think about the European age of exploration. But I think it's really important to point out that, especially as the Europeans make their way around Africa into the Indian Ocean and Asia, that what they are exploring is very well-known territory to the people that are there. It's been mapped out. People have been traveling through these regions for hundreds and hundreds of years. What to the Europeans would be exploration is basically normal life to the people who are living in this world system in the Indian Ocean. All right, so thanks for joining us today. Please share, please subscribe, and we'll see you next time. Bye, everybody. Hey you, thanks for watching World History for You. Please subscribe and share with your friends. We'll see you next time.